Hello, Bible readers. As I read Psalm 18, I thought this is why I wanted to do a deep dive into the Psalms. Because, I mean, I started to read it and it's super long and my eyes started to glaze over. And I'm like, what does this have to do with anything? But look at all the work we've done to get to a point where this made even a little bit of sense to us. There's this very long superscription at the beginning: to the leader, a psalm of David, the servant of the Lord, who addressed the words of this song to the Lord on the day when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. Now, I'm not saying we could all explain every little part of that or every little part of the entire psalm, but we know some things and why some of the things happen the way they do. We know that in book 1 of the Psalms, these first 40-some Psalms, almost all of them have one of these superscriptions. That's just, they just have them. And we know they're trying to help put the Psalm in context, both for worship, as it may have been used in the temple, and for use, personal devotion use, because it could be used in either way. So as I started reading, I noticed that frustrated feeling welling up in me, like, what is this about exactly? I find myself wanting to know about specific circumstances that the psalm is obviously speaking to. The cords of death encompassed me. The torrents of perdition assailed me. The cords of Sheol entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. Okay, how? Like, tell me some stories, right? What exactly is this person talking about? What was going on for this person? And who is this person? Well, we find out a bit more about that as the psalm goes on, that this is a royal person and a righteous person, and we've learned that the Psalms are vague regarding any historical details intentionally, that they are broadly representative of life circumstances intentionally, so that you and I and anyone else of any time, of any place, could possibly pray these Psalms for ourselves. That's what I need to keep remembering. Each psalm walks this fine line of a psalmist, the speaker in the psalm, generically representing all humankind, to a God who responds in particular ways, in specific circumstances, like actually responds. So we are called to not just read the Psalms for information about God, or to become familiar with the story of God. That's not why you sit down and read a psalm, to become familiar with the story of God. We enter a psalm to do psalm things. Let me explain. Basically, we enter a psalm with our baggage, emotional baggage, bringing our experiences that maybe confound us, and then we set that baggage down inside the language of a psalm. We unload our baggage, and then we lay it all out before God, with the words and the feelings of these psalms being the way we bring all this baggage to God, and then we let God respond to all of it. And that's different than reading a gospel story, or a letter from Paul to Corinth, or imagining our way into the end of all things through John's letter to the 7 churches, which we call Revelation. It's a different thing. Each of those genres of writing bring us to a different thing. The Psalms are their own thing to be used in a psalm way, and each psalm is unique unto itself. So Psalm 18 in particular is a royal psalm. I put the quotes around that because that is a particular kind of psalm, as opposed to like a psalm of thanksgiving, a lament psalm. Psalm 2 was a royal psalm. When the setting of that one could have been the installation of a king as God's anointed one? Like, what were the words that were said at the installation of a king? Oh, Psalm 2. That's what. Psalm 18 is about giving thanks for the victories God gives a king. So this psalm also appears in 2 Samuel, chapter 22, which makes sense having read the superscription, right? In 2 Samuel, the poem appears after David is rescued in battles with the Philistines. Royal enemies spoken of in this psalm could be a broader way of referring to the specific troublemaker of 2 Samuel, who is Saul, who appears in the superscription to Psalm 18. Anyway, a leader of God's people could pull this psalm out whenever a royal victory takes place. Maybe that's how it was used, as it celebrates the hope we are all called to live with. It starts with 6 verses of thanksgiving that I feel like are a lot like the camp song, "The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and may the God of our salvation be exalted." I think a lot of the Thanksgiving psalms sound a little bit like that. The point being made in these verses is that the king begs for help, and God heard him, and so delivered the king. Verses 7 to 19 have God show up, right? So the first 6 verses are thanksgiving and praise, and then and here's how God showed up. We call this a theophany, an appearance of God in earthquakes, thunder, cloud, lightning. That's oftentimes how God shows up. Well, in verse 10, God appears in a chariot on the wings of the wind. That's a new one. The purpose of showing up is to reach down and deliver the king from his enemies and from death itself. Verses 20 to 30 then tell us why God does this theophany. And we should know this one. It's going to sound familiar when I say it. The reason this happens, the reason God appears, is because the king is righteous. And that doesn't mean the king is perfect in every way, but that he is in relationship with God through Torah obedience. We have heard this time and again in these first 18, and we will for far more Psalms, that Torah obedience is the sign of righteousness. And when that happens, this is the kind of thing that happens. God reaches down and delivers. There is a faith relationship that God is faithful unto. And then once we hear the why did God do this? Verses 31 to 45, it's a song of victory. It's kind of like a drinking song soldiers might sing in a pub years after an important battle was won, which are, of course, always ways to remember, right? The defeat of our enemies is complete, and God is God. Enter poetic words here. 46 to the end of this psalm put a bow on things by restating God's amazingness. And the thing to remember is, of this whole, the point of this post about Psalm 18 is that you don't need to be a king for this psalm to work. It is an example of hope. Hope from the righteous for God to be faithful is valid and grounded in a God who gets in the fray, who does what God promises. You or I, or any non-king, could use these words to give thanks for our own victories. As I, for example, fought the enemies of fatigue and distraction to write down my script for Psalm 18 and bring myself in front of a camera and give me the time and strength to do this as well as I could, God be praised. My hope was true because it was placed in God. And so your hope can be true, is true as well. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us at all times and in all places.